Okay, guys, we're going to work on, we're doing 5.5 and 5.6 kind of combined. You won't even notice that I'm putting the two sections together. So just so you know, I did call it 5.5 and 5.6 because that's how it is in your book. But today our goal is to solve different polynomials that I cannot factor, and I don't give you one of the factors to start. Like on your quiz from yesterday, you guys, I at least gave you one of them that you could divide and then finish factoring, and you could have solved had I asked you to solve. Right, but today I'm not going to give you anything. A couple things real quick. The fundamental theorem of algebra in math, usually when something sounds hard and very wordy, it's usually pretty easy. I've actually taught you the fundamental theorem of algebra a very long time ago, and you guys just didn't know. So if I look at this equation, I know that green's kind of bright, sorry. How many answers will this have? Hey, look at that. You guys know the fundamental theorem of algebra. How many answers will this one have? Good job. Moving on. What does it mean if the graph looks like that? Good, it's negative. What do we know about its answer? I heard even, I heard odd. Is that even or odd? That's even, good. That's even. So how many answers will it have? An even number, right? What is the answer? X equals what? 1. Where does it cross the x-axis? At 1. Would you believe me if I told you 1 is an answer twice? Not plus or minus. This is a positive 1, right? If you look at a graph, and this is really important today as we're going through this section, if your graph bounces, so to speak, off of your x-axis and comes back, that answer shows up twice. Or technically an even number of times. So right here, x equals 1. Since it bounces, since the graph, it's a real technical term there, bounces off the x-axis, x equals 1 is an answer an even number of times. Thank you, Jessica. Typically it's twice, at least the ones that we're going to look at, but it could be 4 times that answer shows up. It could be 6 times that answer shows up. Just kind of depends on the graph. But if it bounces, it's an even number of times it shows up as an answer. So what does it mean if it goes all the way through it? It shows up once, or 3 times, or 5 times, an odd number. So if you have a graph that goes through, like actually goes through it, right? So that would be an answer. What is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Negative 5. X equals negative 5. That is an answer an odd number of times. Typically it's once, but it could be 3 times, maybe 5 times. At most, what we'll deal with would be 3 times. Okay, so that's really the biggest thing, is to recognize when it bounces that it's probably an answer. It's at least twice. Could be 4, but usually just twice. Okay? All right, so our problem for today, I just kind of told you guys this. Factoring some polynomials can be very difficult. Does everything factor? No, not everything factors. Even though we have a lot of options of how we factor, not everything will factor. So if we can find at least one factor, we can usually break it down, right? The last part of your quiz, I gave you one of the factors, so then you did synthetic, and then you were able to factor and go from there. Okay, so it's the same idea, except I'm not going to give you one of them. You have to find them on your own, and that's where your graphing calculator comes in. Rational root theorem. I know I put a big old X over this. I'll talk about this briefly on one of the examples we'll do, but this is how you do this problem by hand. You can solve these without a graphing calculator, okay? When I taught in Finley, I taught the advanced, the honors classes there. I made them do it by hand first. That was mean. All right, for you guys here today, I will talk to you a little bit about it by hand, but we're going to use technology. We're going to use the graphing calculators. okay? The only reason I'm even going to talk a little bit about it is if those of you that'll go into pre-calc next year, you'll need to recognize how to do it by hand. And I know some of you will take pre-calc next year. All right, let's go real basic though. We'll use the graphing calculators here to get started. Find the rational zeros of x to the fourth minus x cubed plus x squared minus 3x minus 6. Could you factor that? Okay, so how many terms does this thing have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Do we know how to factor something with 5 terms? No. We know how 4 terms, but we don't know how to do something with 5 terms. So we need another option. How do we find some of our answers? So the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is to graph it. So let's grab your graphing calculator. All right, we're going to go ahead and graph this one. Do you remember where to go to graph? What's the first button you hit? Y equals. Are we that rusty? Y equals. All right, and then we have x to the fourth. So remember our x button is next to the green one. To get your exponents, you're going to have to hit the little caret button. X to the fourth. Now be careful or you're going to end up typing everything as an exponent. Do you see how my cursor's still up top? Hit the arrow over to the right and it'll drop it back down for you. You get some really funky looking graphs if you leave all that up there as an exponent. All right, so minus x to the third. Make sure you drop that cursor back down. Plus x squared minus 3x minus 6. Okay, just typing in the equation on there. Remember, then we hit graph. Beautiful, right? That's what it should look like. Anybody's not look like that? Okay. All right, so what we're going to do once we graph it is we're looking for the nice answers. Nice answers. Where does it cross the x-axis? -1 and 2. How can we confirm to make sure it actually crossed at -1 and 2? Even easier than plugging something back in. Go to your table. Remember, if I hit second graph, it pulls up my table. So you said -1, that's a 0. And you told me 2, that's a 0. So make sure you confirm that. I mean, it takes, what, hitting 2 buttons to confirm to make sure those are good answers? Because sometimes the graphs are deceiving. It might look like it goes through something, but if you check your table, it really doesn't. Okay, so just make sure you confirm. So -1 and 2 are good answers. All right, so that being said, come back here. I'm going to write down x equals -1 and 2. I know those are good answers. So we're going to use the nice answers that we find. We're going to use synthetic division. We're going to do this now just like we did on your quiz yesterday. Okay, so let's set up synthetic. So we have 1, -1, 1, -3, -6. All right, do you want to use -1 or do you want to use 2 first? Does it matter? It doesn't matter. I'll go -1 just because it's the first thing I have written. It does not matter which one we use first. All right, so we're going to use synthetic, so I'm going to drop that first number down. All right, then we multiply. -1, add -2. Multiply gives me +2. Adding gives me 3. Multiply -3. Add -6. Multiply 6. Add 0. If I get 0 as a remainder, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Good thing. If you put a number in and do your synthetic and you don't get 0, one of 2 things either happened. Either 1, you did your math wrong, or 2, it's not a good answer. Okay? So it's just a nice little heads up. All right, so this started x to the 4th. This is now down to an x cubed. For me to factor, I like them to be x squared, right? If it's down to an x squared, it's usually easier to factor for me. So I have another answer. Let's use it again. So I'm just going to do synthetic again, just right off of where I left off. So now this time I'm going to use the 2. drop down to your 1. And now we're using this set of numbers to do synthetic with the 2. Okay, so we'll do synthetic again. Multiply, you get 2, add 0, multiply 0, add 3, multiply 6, add 0. Again, I got 0 as a remainder. I know it's a good answer. So if my problem started x to the 4th, and I did synthetic twice, I'm down to an x squared. So let's fill our x's back in now. We have x squared plus 0x plus 3. We'll say equals 0. Got that 0 sitting there. Can we now factor or solve or do something from here? Now, if there's a 0x, is it really there? No. So really, I have x squared plus 3 equals 0. Can you solve that, or you want to factor it? Yeah, let's just solve that. So I would subtract 3. X squared equals negative 3. Take the square root. What does x equal? I radical 3. So how many answers should I have? How many answers should I have? How many answers should I have? 4. Should have 4. Here's 2, 3, and 4. So my answers are right there. Should you have known from the very start that 2 of your answers were imaginary? Just because we're dealing with graphs doesn't mean they're always imaginary. What do we know about imaginary answers? Do they cross the x-axis? They don't. They don't cross the x-axis. So when I look at my graph, it only crossed twice. I knew there was 4 answers, so that means the other 2 had to be imaginary because they didn't show on here. Because if it goes through here, that means this answer either shows up 1 time or it could be 3 times. 1 time or 3 times. I mean, is it possible that maybe this answer showed up 3 times and this one showed up once to give me my 4? It's possible. But more than likely, since it only showed 2 answers on there, the other 2 are probably imaginary. How are we doing so far? Doing okay? All right. Let's go back. Let's try another one. We'll get there. Let's look at the next problem real quick. So find the zeros. How many terms does this one have? Marcus? How many answers will I have? 4. Okay, want to make sure we're good. All right, so let's go back to your calculator. Y equals, and then just hit clear, and it'll clear it out for you. Y equals, and then clear. All right, so let's go ahead and type this one in. So 3x to the 4th. And be careful that you're not typing everything as an exponent. 17x cubed plus 30x squared plus 12x minus 8. Again, before you hit graph, please look at what you typed in. That's usually when people mess up, it's whatever you typed in. You forgot an x somewhere or everything's an exponent or something. So make sure you check that before you hit graph. Then we hit graph. How many answers will this one have again? 4. Should have 4. So when I graph it, I'm looking for the nice ones. Oh, that's a cool graph. So I'm looking for nice answers. Where do you think it is? -2 looks good. What about the other one? We're not really sure, right? Yeah, maybe it's like a 3rd, a 4th, maybe? I don't know. Something like that, right? We're not really sure. So let's look at our table. You guys said -2, right? Yep. -2 is good. Now the problem with our table, does it show us all the numbers in between? It doesn't. It shows us the nice, pretty numbers. So we know -2 is good. Let's at least start with that. So we know x equals -2. We know that's a good one. So let's use synthetic and kind of see where we're at. So fill out our synthetic. We have 3, 17, 30, 12, -8. I'm I'm going to use -2. I'm going to drop that first number down. So we multiply, get -6, add 11, multiply -22, add 8, multiply -16, add -4, multiply 8, add 0. So that's good. I'm down to a 0. Am I down to an x squared yet? No, which means I need another answer. So let's go back to our graph. I need another answer. How on earth do I find where that is? Do you think your calculator's smart enough to tell you where it is? Now, don't just start moving that random cursor around. Please don't do that. Okay? Your calculator can calculate for you exactly where that is. So, you guys see above the trace button? That trace button I told you to stop using? See where it says calculate? Yeah, so hit second trace to bring up your calculate menu. Whoa. There we go. What do you think we want to calculate? A 0. Did we call these roots or zeros, solutions? They're all the same. So option number 2. Do you remember the whole left bound, right bound? Did we talk about that in here one other time? It's asking you that again, left bound, right bound. So left and right should say upper and lower. That's really what it should say. Left bound in this case is going to be below. Right bound is going to have to be somewhere above the x-axis. So you're going to have to move it on one side or the other. So left bound, if I'm looking for this one, somewhere below. Is my cursor somewhere below it right now? Yeah, okay, so hit enter. And it's going to ask right bound. So hit your right arrow to move it. Oops, went off my screen. Now it's somewhere above the x-axis. Hit enter. Stupidest function on the calculator. Do I want to guess? No. Just hit enter again past the guess thing, because that's just dumb. And it'll move your cursor. Watch where it goes. It'll move it exactly right where you're trying to find it. It's going to tell you that it is at 0.33333333. What's 0.3 repeating? Fraction. Fraction, people. What's 0.3 repeating? That is 1/3. Thank you. We should recognize 1/3. All right, talk to me. Questions on how to make all that work? Okay. That's right. You'll remember, I promise. So you'll hit second trace, brings up your calculating menu. Okay, which one do I want? The 0, so choose option number 2. And it's going to bring up left bound, question mark. You need to move your cursor. In this case, it's below, because it depends on which one I'm looking for. If I was trying to find this one, where's left of this one? It's above it. We read from left to right. So as you've traced this line to follow it, to the left of this point is below it. To the left of this point is actually above it, as I've drawn it. So you got to kind of be careful. If you mess up which one's left, which one's right, your calculator is going to give you an error. So it's going to tell you something's wrong. Okay. So left bound, it needs to be somewhere below. Wherever it is below, then hit enter. So go ahead and try that. Make sure we're on the same page here. Stephanie, it's okay. Where are you lost at? Hit graph. Hit second, trace. Option 2. Does it say left bound? Is your cursor below the x-axis? Move it. Hit the left arrow or whatever until you have to move it below. Hit enter. Does it say right bound? Okay, that's right where I'm at. Right bound. Move your cursor. Hit the right arrow. Move your cursor so it's now above the x-axis. Hit enter. Do you want to guess? I bet it's at 1/3. That's my guess. Hit enter again past the guess thing. That's stupid. And it'll move your cursor right where you wanted it, and it will tell you where that value is. 0.3 repeating is 1/3. Yeah, if it says guess, just hit enter again. We don't want to guess. Do you have to use this method very often? Not really. Most of them you'll have some nice, pretty ones. But every once in a while, if you forget this and you're like, crap, how do I find the other answer? Could you guess and then try to do synthetic and see if you get a 0 for a remainder? You could. That's how you do it by hand. All right, so we know 1/3 is the other one now. So let's do synthetic again with 1/3. And we'll get more practice with those buttons on the calculator, so don't panic, okay? All right, so we'll drop down. What is 1/3 of 3? 1. And then we add 12. What's a third of 12? It's 4. So, no, I'm impressed she's doing them in her head. A third of 12? And that gives me 2. Sound good? The thirds really weren't that bad. Am I down to an x squared yet? Yeah. Okay. All right, again, I started x to the 4th. I did synthetic twice, so I'm down to an x squared plus 12x plus 12 equals 0. I would factor this. Could you use quadratic formula? You could. Will I? No, I'll factor. First thing when I look for factoring, which is 3. Good. We could take out a 3. So x squared. You okay? Okay. X squared plus 4x plus 4. And then factor further. What are your signs? Well, plus. Options for A. Just X. And then C. There's your 2 and 2. All right, so then X equals -2, -2, -2, and 1/3. Do I have 4 answers? I do. What did we talk about? If your graph goes through a number, it shows up 1 time, 3 times, 5 times. In this case, it showed up 3 times. But do we know that from the start? We don't know that. Real quick, you don't have to write this down. I just want to kind of show it to you real quick. The whole rational root theorem, the way that I used to teach my students to do this by hand. Those of you especially who are going to go into pre-calc next year, I want to make sure that you've seen this at least once, okay? The way that it works to do this by hand, which is a very frustrating process, is you would take all of your factors for your last number and all of the factors for your first number, and you have to make fractions out of these. So what do you multiply to get 3? Multiply to get 8? Okay, so you would have to, it's called your P and Q list, if you've ever heard that term before or not. You take, this is your Q's, you take Q divided by P. So I would have to take 1 over 1, which is 1, and I'd have to do 1 over 3, which is a third, and then I have to do it with the next one, so 8 over 1, which is 8, 8 over 3, 8 thirds, I have to do it with the 2, 2 over 1 is 2, 2 over 3, I have to do it with the 4, 4 over 1, which is 4, and 4 over 3. So these are your possible answers, but to make it even harder, these possibilities are all plus minus. So how many possibilities do I have? I have 16 possible answers. So I would have to take my 16 possible answers and try synthetic division and find the ones that work. That's how you do it by hand. Now, that being said, even though we're using technology, could it maybe have helped you? Because when you looked at that graph, and I asked you, where is this? We were like, I don't know, maybe a third, a fourth, somewhere in there. We weren't really sure. If I knew my PQ list, what might have been a good guess? A third. A third may have been a good guess because it's actually on my list. Would 1/4 have been a good guess? No, it's not even on here. Okay, that's how you do it by hand. Take all your factors for the last number, factors from the first number, you have to make all your fractions. They're all plus minus. And then you try synthetic over and over and over and over again until you can figure out which ones actually work. And what happens if you messed up your math? Yeah, I saw students do that. They would go through the entire list of all 16, like, I can't figure out which one works. It's because they did their math wrong. Frustrating. Now, am I going to require you to do that? No, I'm going to let you use your graphing calculator. So now that whole second trace, left bound, right bound doesn't seem so bad, does it? If you button push and I get my answer, or I try 16 possibilities and hope I don't mess up my basic math. Okay, all right, moving on. You've seen it by hand. You know what you do. All right, so look at the next one. How many terms does this one have? Terms. 6. How many answers will it have? 5. Highest exponent's 5. Okay, so let's go ahead and graph this one. So if you're back on your calculator, hit y equals and hit clear. All right, so x to the 5th. Are you talking to me or your calculator? Hit enter or clear. What is that?
I just started typing like numbers.
All right, x to the 5th minus 4x to the 4th plus 4x cubed plus 10x squared minus 13x minus 14. Anybody type the whole thing as an exponent yet? No, that's good. It'll happen. You type part of it as an exponent? Yeah, it's real easy to do. You forget to hit the drop it over and out of the exponent. All right, so then we hit graph, and we're looking for the nice ones. See how many nice answers we can find. Real quick, is it possible that I graph it and I find all of the nice answers just from looking at the graph? Yeah, it's possible. And that's when you get real excited because you have no work to do. All right. So what did we find for answers? -1 and 2 and I see 3 answers. Yes, very nice. -1 shows up twice. See how it bounced? It bounced. Showed up twice. And again, let's just double check. Second graph pulls up my table just to make sure. We said -1 and 2. They're good. Please double check that. I know for a fact, like on the homework you guys have over this, I know there's one graph that looks like it bounces and it really doesn't. So please check your table to make sure, confirm that it actually is there, okay? So -1 twice and 2. All right, so let's go back. X equals -1, -1, and 2. Do you see, though, how it's important to recognize when it bounces, the answer showed up twice? It's going to help you out. So let's set up our synthetic. So 1, -4, 4, 10, -13, -14. All right, I'm just going to go right down my list, if that's okay with you guys. I'll start with -1. But does it matter what order I go in? Does it matter? No, it doesn't matter. So just to be clear, it doesn't matter which way you go. All right, so multiply -1, add -5, multiply 5, add 9, multiply -9, add 1, multiply -1, add -14, multiply 14, add 0. So if I go through and I don't get a 0, what's it mean? Or you did your math wrong. Yeah, one or the other. It's either not the right number or you did your math wrong. It's probably you did your math wrong. All right, so let's go again. So I used this one. Next, I'm going to use the other -1. Thank you. Thank you. Haircut? Yes? No? Looks nice. Hairs cut, not just one. All right, so here we go. I'm going to use the next -1. So multiply, add, multiply, add. I know, sorry. Multiply, add, multiply, add. Now here's my magic trick. You ready? Yeah, the one day Mariah tried to move hers on her page, she's like, oh, I can't move it. I love that though. You're really watching me. You're into it. All right, and let's go synthetic one more time so we can use my last number with a 2. Drop down the 1. We'll go synthetic again. What? You're done? The whole thing? All right, so I used the 3 answers I found. I started x to the 5th. I did synthetic 3 times. I'm down to an x squared. Isn't that my ultimate goal? Yep, x squared minus 4x plus 7 equals 0. And I just need to finish solving from there. Can I factor it? It's not going to factor. You can try, but it won't work. So if it doesn't factor, you guys want to complete the square? Yeah, I don't either. What would you probably use next then? Yeah, let's go quadratic formula. Good. Negative b is 4 plus or minus square roots b squared. Good. You learned something this year, if nothing else, right? You know the quadratic formula. Oh, you'll use it again. You'll have a math class next year. Although my seniors in here, you may never use it again. All right, so we have 4 plus or minus radical. What do we get underneath there? Good. Negative 12 all over 2. So that'll be 4 plus or minus. Good. 2i radical 3 all over 2. Divide them all by 2. So we get 2 plus or minus I radical 3. So there's 2 answers, 3, 4, 5. How important is it going to be that you circle your final answers for me? Yeah, because you're going to have a lot of work on some of these, and I'm not going to be able to find them all. So just make sure you're circling your final answers. Even if you don't write them all in a row for me, if you just kind of do it like that where you circled some and you circled the end, that's fine, as long as I can see them all. But again, is it possible I graph it and I find all my answers and I have no work? Yeah, it's very possible. Okay. Ready to try another one? How many terms does it have? How many answers will this one have? 4, right? Because my highest exponent's 4. See how important it is to recognize how many answers you should have, though, at the end of all this? It's real easy to forget 1 or 2 of them. Michaela, put it away, please. All right, so let's go ahead and graph this. So y equals, clear. When you're typing it in the calculator, no big deal. Just type in exactly what it is. When we get to our synthetic, that's when it'll be an issue. So x to the 4th minus 9x squared minus 4x. Everyone does it at least once in their life. I still do it all the time. Especially because my calculator here is different than my own calculator over on my desk. I have an older version, so mine doesn't act the same way. All right, and then we hit graph. Oh. How many answers did you tell me this was going to have? How many answers can I see on my graph? Nope. What are my answers? Okay, should I confirm? Yeah, let's double check. So second graph, pull up your table. So you said -2, and we know it was twice because it bounced. You said me 1 and 3. Sweet. So x equals, what were they again? If I can see them all, do I have to do any work? If you're like, maybe they're okay, and you're not really sure, could you use synthetic just to make sure you get a 0? Yeah, you could. Do you have to? No. I can just look at it. I double checked it in my table. Moving on. That's when we're happy, right? That last one was a whole lot of work. This one, moving on. Gotta throw you a bone once in a while. All right, let's try the next one. How many terms does that have? 5. How many answers will you have? 4. All right, so let's go back to our graph. Y equals, clear out what's in there. Let's type it in. Do you have an iPhone? Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, look at that, you guys. I just typed it in as an exponent. I know. See, I told you. We all do it at some point. Go away. X cubed. There we go. All right, so this one should have how many answers? 4. How many can I see? 2. Where does it look like it crosses? -2 and 1. Let's confirm. -2 is good. 1 is good. So -2 and 1 are my good answers? Okay. So x equals -2 and 1. So then from there, let's use our synthetic. So 1, 1, 2, 4, -8. Aren't you glad you don't have to do long division with these? So I'm going to use -2 first. Again, does not matter which one you use first. I just like to go in my order. So let's do synthetic. All right, so I go through synthetic the first time. Checks out. Let's go through with my next number, which is a 1. So we'll do synthetic with that one. Yeah. Did you do a different problem? All right, so we go through synthetic twice. I started x to the 4th, so what am I down to? Down to an x squared. So we'll put our x's back in. X squared plus 0x plus 4 equals 0. Get rid of the 0x, it just kind of gets in your way. So I really have x squared plus 4 equals 0. You want to factor it or you want to solve it? I would solve that because you can't factor it. So we get x squared equals -4 square root. It's not a difference of squares because there's no minus sign. Good. Plus or minus 2i. So plus or minus 2i, -2, and 1. Did I find 4 answers? Yeah. Also, if you're somebody who has a tendency to forget your plus or minus and you just wrote 2i and you're like, wait, I have 3 answers. Where's my other one? Hopefully that's kind of a red flag. You forgot something. Marcus? Sure. All right, we got 1 to go. 1 to go. What do I do first? Let's graph it. How many answers will this one have? It'll have 4. Okay, so let's go ahead and graph it. See if we can get lucky and find all 4 or if we have to do some work. No. All right, so go ahead and graph it. Let's find our nice answers. Oh. It does bounce. So if I can find that one, I have 2 answers, right? That's pretty, isn't it? All right. So do you have any nice answers? Are they nice? That I can look at and they cross nice and pretty and I can confirm in my table? What? It depends which one you're looking at. All right. Let's we got to go through our process, right? That's all the buttons in the calculator you guys were a little nervous about. Which one do you want to find? You want to just start at the first one and see what happens? Okay. So real quick, if I'm trying to find this point, left bound is where? Above or below? Above. Think about when you're drawing it, you'd start at the left side and work your way down. So left bound's above it. So what buttons do I push to get to all of that? Good. Second, trace. Which option? Option 2. And it's going to say left bound. If we're trying to find that first one, hit your left arrow or wherever your cursor is. Yours might be somewhere else. I got to move it till it moves. There we go. Anywhere above that x-axis, right at that point. Doesn't matter how far it goes. I will caution you, sometimes, depending on the graph, you go to hit your cursor and it flies off your screen. And that's okay. As long as you know it's above or below wherever you're trying to find it, it's okay if your cursor's off your screen. Sometimes you can't help it. Hit enter, and it'll say right bound. So where am I trying to go now? Below that line. I only had to hit it once, and mine dropped below there. Hit enter. If your thing says guess, you're not done. What do I do to get past the guess? Hit enter again. And again, double check. Where did your cursor go? Did it go where you wanted it to? Okay. Negative 1.732051. Are we allowed to round things? No. No. We do not round. We want exact answers. Does anybody know what that is as a fraction? No. I'm going to tell you right now, it's not a fraction. See if anybody knew it. I got an answer. All right, that is not good. All right, so that one doesn't help me, which means if it's an ugly decimal like that, you guys, it means it's a radical. I believe that's radical 1 or radical 3. So instead of trying to find this 0, let's try to find here. And if I find this one, that shows up how many times? That shows up twice. That'll give me 2 answers. Let's find that one. So let's go through the process again. Second, trace. Option 2, left bound. Now notice this is all below the x-axis. So this is a little easier to recognize. To the left of this point is anywhere over here. So, okay, it's already on the left of it. Right bound, I'm going to hit the right arrow. I just have to go to the right of that point. So that's like right on it. I'm just going to move it somewhere to the right. It doesn't matter. Anywhere to the right over here. Hit enter. You want to guess? Anybody got a guess? It looks like -1/2. That's what it looks like. There it goes. It's -1/2. All of this with a random 2 at the end, yours might even show something different. Yours shows a 3, yours shows a 1. Somebody's might just say -0.5. It's the pixels in your calculator. That's kind of deterring it just a smidge. This is -1/2. Does it? It just depends. It is -1/2. This is knowing your calculator. All right, so -1/2. So that means -1/2 shows up how many times? Twice. So x equals -1/2 twice. Is that enough to get me down to an x squared? Yeah, because it's x to the 4th. If I do synthetic twice, it'll get me down to an x squared, so I'll be okay. All right, so let's set this up. So we have 4, 4, -11, -12, -3. Be careful still with synthetic. If you're missing pieces, you will have to still put zeros in. Okay, so just be cautious of that. The one that we had with the missing piece, we found all our nice answers, so we didn't have to practice that. All right, so let's go -1/2. What is -1/2 of 4? -2. That gives me 2. What is -1/2 of 2? -1. That gives me -12. What is -1/2 of -12? 6. That gives me -6. And again, if you're not sure, use your calculator, okay? -1/2 of -6 is +3. 0. Yay, it worked. I got a 0 for remainder. I know I'm good. Can we go again? Yep, we found that answer shows up twice. Let's do it again. We're almost done. Last problem. -1/2 of 4? -2. 0. Negative half of 0? Gives me negative 12. Negative half of negative 12? 0. Yay. All right. So I started x to the 4th. I did synthetic twice. I'm down to x squared. So 4x squared plus 0x minus 12 equals 0. So really I have 4x squared minus 12. Good. Let's just move the 12. 4x squared equals 12. Divide by 4. X squared equals 3. What did I tell you that fraction was? Plus or minus radical 3? Thank you. And circle your other two. Otherwise, I can't find them. All right. Look back at that graph. We found this ugly fraction. I told you, I'm pretty sure that's a radical 3. It was negative radical 3. What do you think that one is? A positive radical 3. So there's your plus and minus radical 3. Radical 3 is a real number. It's 1.7 whatever. And then there was the other two answers that it bounced off of. How are we feeling? Not too bad? Especially when they're nice ones. The calculator part, okay, I can always help you with that. But as long as they're nice ones, we're okay? Awesome.